News. It's time now for the week that was. Let's take a look at the top stories that made headlines around the globe this week, and we're going to start here in Nigeria. As Nigeria confronts a worsening wave of insecurity, the House of Representatives has convened a rare special session on national security with calls for a ban on unstructured amnesty talks by states and communities, making police funding more transparent and considering decentralized policing, whether community or state police. Now, I covered that session for Arise News. Here's my report. With a surging insecurity crisis, and in response, the House of Representatives has convened a special plenary on national security. Speaker Tajin Abbas opened the session, declaring that there is no Christian genocide in Nigeria. The violence, he noted, affects citizens of all faith.
The various attacks are not only coordinated but designed to destabilize our country. They aim to create the impression that violent groups can act without restraint.
The Speaker warned of unprecedented national challenges, urging a measured and deliberate approach rather than sensational reactions. He also addressed the Religious Freedom Accountability Act in the U.S. Congress, asserting that Nigeria does not sponsor violence and reaffirming dialogue as the preferred method to resolve conflict. Amid escalating insecurity with hundreds of Nigerians in the grip of kidnappers, bandits and terrorists, Deputy Speaker Benjamin Kalu struck a blunt tone and proposed banning unstructured amnesty talks, making police funding more transparent and considering decentralized policing.
Many will say banning amnesty negotiation is too rigid. My response, Mr. Speaker, is show me one amnesty deal in Zamfara, Katsina, Sokoto, Southeast, wherever in Nigeria, that has produced lasting peace. What we have seen are staged ceremonies, rusty weapons surrendered, violence resuming within months. Security experts across the spectrum argue negotiating with bandits legitimizes criminality.
Minority Leader Honorable Kingsley Chinda called for national unity.
Also succeed in this battle if we deny obvious facts. Let me start by asking, are there religious killings in Nigeria? The answer is yes. But is that the major cause of insecurity in our country? The answer is also no. Whilst there are religious killings, it will amount to painting the insecurity issue with a single brush to say that that is the only reason why we have insecurity.
Chairman of key House committees and the Northern Caucus echoed these concerns, noting that insecurity cuts across religion, ethnic and political divides. They warned that the military is overstretched and pushed to restore the police as the front line of internal defense.
A bullet can overcome a terrorist. Only good governance, opportunity and inclusion can overcome terrorism.
Mr. Speaker, we can even declare legislative emergency. Close the House, shut it up. Who are you legislating for? What laws are you making when the country is running in blood? The country is running in blood and tears. You cannot go, the farmers cannot go to farm. Our our traders cannot go to market. Worshippers cannot go to mosque, cannot go to churches. Then what are you legislating?
The special session will resume on Wednesday as the House works to craft long-term legislative solutions to Nigeria's security crisis. Adesu Agiwal-Sage, Arise News. Well, the focus in the House of Representatives this week was insecurity, as was the focus all around the country. We're dealing with incessant mass kidnappings. Just 2 days ago, I believe, 7 children were kidnapped in Buhari in the Capital Territory, the Federal Capital Territory. Now, this is at the front doors of our lawmakers, and it seemed that they decided to finally speak, and speak they truly did. Now, I think, when we discuss the different roles in government, when we discuss our legislator, very importantly, they have a role to play here, and not just by speaking as they did this week. A lot of conversation has been going on around state policing or community policing. They are empowered to make that constitutional amendment. They are empowered to write that bill and pass that law. We already have a bill on state policing on the floor of the National Assembly written by Honorable Bello El-Rufai from Kaduna. But we also have, multiple bills in the past that have not been passed. When the Deputy Speaker spoke on Tuesday, it really touched my heart, particularly when he said we cannot be negotiating with those who are stealing our children. We had Honorable Nwokolo also speak up. We had Honorable Jimmy Benson speak up and say that we are not going to stop terrorism with just bullets alone. And I think it does seem, for a lot of people are not trusting this coming out of the National Assembly, because at the same time, on Friday, of course, the Senate President did say that they were going to go have a sumptuous dinner in the villa. I believe that was to draw up some support for the Reserve Seats for Women bill there by the First Lady. Yeah. So perhaps that was not communicated, in the way or manner that people had expected. However, Nigerians need more than talk. We need action. And I'm not entirely sure if our National Assembly, if our legislative arm of government is acting as a proper check and balance to the executive arm of government, and not just the presidency, but when we talk about our security chiefs coming, to the National Assembly, we have a lack of accountability, I think, in Nigeria. We have an accountability problem. And so if people just talk, if people are quote unquote rescued, but we don't see anyone held accountable, then we have to keep having these same conversations. We've been having these conversations for years. 6 years ago, when I was in law school, Buhari was under curfew because of terrorism. And you're telling me that 6 years later, they're kidnapping children from the same Buhari, when Nigerian Law School built a huge campus. It is unbecoming. I don't even, it's not a tragedy, but at some point in time, we need to stop having just conversations, and we have to see people being held accountable on all tiers of government, on all walks of life, whether it's people funding it, whether it's people dereliction of duty, whether it's those who are kidnapping. We need to see people held accountable.
Absolutely. I mean, Adesua, in my opinion, all of these situations will have to go hand in hand, go together. We can't stop talking. We can ask them to stop talking. But also, like you said, it is also very important to see action, to see people being brought to book. It's good that at this time, at least they could dedicate a whole session, to talking about insecurity in Nigeria. There are those who might want to ask, would they have done that if the congressional a session in America are not held, and people are saying, where is our own National Assembly if America can be this thorough and detailed about what is happening in Nigeria? But of course, we should at least acknowledge that they have done something. Like you said, I align with what a number of the House of Reps members, from the Deputy Speaker, Benjamin Kalu, to Jimmy Benson, representing Ikorodu, the keywords that they submitted, a few other people too, saying that, yes, don't let us just dance around the issues. Let's call a spade, a spade. And I like the idea of banning these, nonsensical amnesty deals that have been going on for quite a while. And he asked the right questions, Benjamin Kalu. Show me in Zamfara, in Borno, anywhere that they thought that amnesty deal would be a lifesaver. What has it brought, to ensure that this does not continue? We haven't, gained anything whatsoever on that. And therefore, I think that if there is something that they can at least show that they have contributed, it will be to ensure that the amnesty deal is discontinued. But not only that, to also ensure that the right questions are asked when we hear from government spokespersons, or even from the military, when they go out and they tell Nigerians that, those who have been kidnapped have been either rescued or they have returned home. And if you recall, this is not the first time that you will be interrogating the choice of language that we have been fed. In what manner were they rescued? Were ransoms paid? If you claim that ransoms were not paid, haven't rescued the kidnapped or abducted student, what happened to those, the kidnappers? Very simple matter. If it's a security issue that you don't want Nigerians to have an idea of what it's doing, the only thing that will convince Nigerians is that they are no longer happening. Because the reason why we will think that they're happening is because you left the kidnappers, unattended, not dealing with them. And therefore, these are the conversations, that we must continue to have. I like what is happening in terms of the relationship with the American government. We don't know whether this is just to deodorize the whole idea of, let's form a committee, let's talk. Like you said, committees are okay, but then let's manage the talk with the work. those that needs to be dealt with, deal with them. Part of what I believe that the National Assembly should also ask, the key questions will be, what happens to the so-called list that UAE, America, and a few other countries have pointed at? Who is on the list? What is happening to them? For how long will it take to investigate those that are said to be the financiers and backers of terror? Like Jimmy Benson said, bullets can deal with terrorists, but then what will deal with terrorism is not just bullets on the boys that they are using. What happens to those who are behind it? What happens to the state of the economy? What happens to, a few key important questions that should go beyond who somebody said this, at the House.
Yes. Just before we move on to our next story, I think credit must be given to Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, for allowing the conversation to be had so openly. Honorable Kingsley Chinda, who's the minority leader, said they must set politics aside. And even Honorable Dogua, who called for the House to be Hassan Dogo. Yes, he's the Northern Caucus leader in the House of Representatives. And even though he said that we should, set maybe they should close down the House. Deputy Speaker Benjamin Kalu was like, no, we don't need to do that. However, a lot of people from across the country and from across parties spoke very fervently, and they said, it's time to talk about real lives, not politics. And I think we must credit the Speaker for allowing a House session like that, multiple days of open dialogue for true conversation about the state of Nigeria.
It is what is expected of them. They should do more of that. But they should also watch out that it looks like, the sort of submissions that we are getting from different parts of the regions of Nigeria shows, the attitude, the submissions from the south versus the submissions from the north. Take a deeper look at it and then examine clearly. All right, we move on. Well, the historic G20 summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, the first ever on African soil, is generally considered to have surpassed expectations, with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa standing firm despite pressure from US President Donald Trump. Again, my colleague here and our rights correspondent Adesu Agiwa Osagi reports.
The G20 summit in South Africa has come to an end, and the world is asking, are the results reached this weekend going to be symbolic, or are they going to be actually effective? One thing is for sure, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has risen to the moment. He has shown that Africa is ready for the world stage. South Africa, eager to demonstrate its readiness to lead on the world stage, transformed the Johannesburg Expo Center at Nasrec into a fortress of innovation and hospitality. Delegates and media passed through state-of-the-art facial recognition gates, while inside the venue overflowed with food, drinks, and entertainment for its global dignitaries. Across the halls, one sentiment was unmistakable. South Africans were proud of President Cyril Ramaphosa's leadership.
As a South African, I'm very proud that we pulled it off. President Trump or members of his administration, they attacked South Africa 18 times this year. They really wanted to upend this G20. So to have pulled it off and to secure world values like solidarity, equality, sustainability, each with programmatic impact.
Leadership exercised under the looming shadow of threats from the United States President Donald Trump.
Presence of a country that was not here. And it was sort of like a rainstorm on the horizon that might or might not break onto the land below. And in a sense, I think it's appropriate to say that the Trump administration took a wild swing at this and didn't hit the ball.
The Minister of International Relations, Ronald Lumalo, reminded the world that the summit was bigger than any single nation.
What we have done was to affirm the multilateral institution that is the G20, and South Africa stands very firm from the beginning that the agenda that we have set for the G20 is relevant, it's important for the Global South, it's important for our continent, the issues of solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
As the summit drew to a close, South African journalists delivered a final message. They burst into a Zulu song whose English meaning carried a sharp, unmistakable edge. Your mother will beg you, not us. A moment of defiance and a declaration that Africa's voice has arrived on the global stage. Adesu Agiwa Osage, Arise News, Johannesburg.
All right, Adesu, I mean, you were there, you covered it live all of last weekend, you know, and throughout the period that it held, you know, we're having you live, you know, discussing these things. I like what one of the speakers in that clip said. It's about South Africa winning, seemingly, against Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump, you know, took a, you know, wide swing, but didn't hit the ball. And I think that South Africa should be commended, you know, for holding the first ever of its type G20 summit in Africa. But then beyond the talk, beyond the optics, beyond the Zulu dance, you know, and beyond the fact that, yes, we can stand firm and hold our own against Donald Trump, what is this? What is in this for Africa, frankly speaking?
Well, I think what is in this for Africa is a very good question. And we saw some concessions come out for Africa. First of all, with the declaration that Donald Trump had warned Cyril Ramaphosa not to make the G20 leaders declaration. In that declaration, a lot of what the work there is about Africa, particularly leveraging our minerals for inclusive growth, with better ownership of our mineral resources. We also have climate finance, so the just energy transition, and part of that is over 500 million euros that has been pledged by the EU to Africa for funding of clean energy on the continent. There's also pledges for clean cooking for the continent. So when it comes to climate change and clean energy and the just energy transition and utilization of clean energy on the continent, we've seen that. When it comes to minerals and working with that, we've seen that. We've also seen South Africa as a nation itself take advantage of the G20 and other nations, particularly, for example, Indonesia and South Africa removing visa restrictions for each other in order to improve trade and relations between both countries. The Indonesian vice president or deputy was there at the G20. We've seen also IBSA work together, so that's India, Brazil, and South Africa. So these are some South Africa-specific wins. But of course, when it comes to continent, South Africa is trying to act as a leader on the continent and utilize. But I think they've done very well in terms of utilizing their position. You know, the spokesman for Cyril Ramaphosa said that Africa is mentioned 80 times in the declaration, that a lot of the relief and specific trade, you know, language in there is about Africa, is about the continent and also about the global south, but particularly about Africa. And so I think Cyril Ramaphosa did a good job there, and also inviting other African nations like Nandi Ndaitwah of Namibia. We saw Ethiopia there, we saw Kashim Shettima there, and those countries also used that invitation as an opportunity for them to meet with other trade partners like India, like Canada. And of course, America not being there allowed for more of these middle powers, as we talk about, a multipolar world, to reach out amongst each other. Qatar was present, Saudi Arabia was present, and they met with other countries like, you know, Namibia. So also, I think we also have to ask ourselves, not just has what Africa gotten from it, but what did Nigeria specifically get from it with the delegation that went there, not just the vice president, but of course on the sidelines we saw some governors there, and we saw tens of aides to the president there, even though the president himself wasn't there. And so we also have to ask ourselves, how do we truly utilize these events? Are we only signing MOUs, or are we getting actual investment? Are we reducing our visa, you know, restrictions? And of course,
particularly even with South Africa.
Particularly with South Africa, you know, I was Lamola over there. I tried to ask him also about Trump, because Trump says afterwards that he's not inviting South Africa to G20, the next one in Miami, 2026, even though the G20 is not, it does not have a secretariat, it does not have the power to make this unilateral decision. So it's yet to be seen how the other countries in the G20 are going to react to that.
I thought he's basically saying that, you know, South Africa will not be welcomed in America since the meeting will hold in America.
We'll see how that goes. But also, he did say that they were weaponizing the G20. He has said that there's white genocide in South Africa and said that there's Christian genocide in Nigeria. You know, pressing Lamola on that, but he did not comment. But there is also a question to be asked about Nigeria's positioning on the continent. Where are we? I do not understand.
And shouldn't we even be using the style, shall we say, of Ramaphosa, you know, in dealing with Trump? You know, they had a meeting in South Africa. He was kind of embarrassed, but then he didn't take the embarrassment to heart. He has, you know, stood firm and is leading his country, saying that America will not determine, you know, our future. I think that there's one or two lessons, you know, to be picked.
There are many lessons. You know, after South Africa, I went to Luanda, Angola, and I remember the role Nigeria played in Angola's struggle, even standing against the British and the Americans at that time, when the Americans did not want to release the funds from Angola's oil back to them as they were struggling against the Portuguese for independence. And I was looking around Luanda and I was like, I can't believe Nigeria was doing big brother for this big country. Because if we look at even what we played in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, and if we look at our positioning now on the continent and in the world, even after the embarrassment in Guinea-Bissau, you actually have to ask yourself that are we keep going to move from the back pedal? Are we keep going to play catch up? Or are we actually going to come into ourselves as a nation? Because Nigeria deserves so much more than what we're giving it right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
right.
Let's move on to the next story, as 38 Christian worshippers who were kidnapped during a deadly church attack in central Nigeria's Kwara State have regained their freedom. Heavily armed gunmen had attacked Christ Apostolic Church in Eruku town on Tuesday, killing 2 people and taking others hostage. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu, in a statement, attributed the freedom of the worshippers to the efforts of security agencies without giving further details. And this is exactly what we are talking about when we say, have people been rescued? Have they been released? Have ransoms been repaid? People can say that there are security situations, but even when America went over to kill Osama bin Laden, they kept it secret, and then they still told the world the next day what happened.
Absolutely.
It's been days, and we still do not know how these people regained their freedom, and we must call a spade a spade. What we are hearing these days in release or escape is a euphemism for paying ransom. Unless we're told otherwise, we must believe that the kidnappers did not suddenly release these people out of the kindness of their hearts, particularly in the videos that we're seeing the kidnappers and terrorists themselves release on social media, which they have now continuously done. What this means is that if we as a nation or as a people keep paying ransom, we have made kidnapping and terrorism a profitable business in Nigeria. A lawmaker stood up and said that it's not profitable to be a terrorist in Nigeria. He is not lying. We have allowed these kidnappers entrench themselves and call it banditry, and then be able to build their terror organizations small by small. We are seeing families come out and say that they're asking for bikes, motorcycles as part of the kidnapping ransom. What is that for? It is for terror. It is for further terrorist activity. The money that they use to do what? Feed themselves, buy drugs and buy weaponry. And then they grow. They use these ransoming of small groups of people. It grows bigger. They get more money. They recruit more people, and then all of a sudden we act like we don't know where Mahmouda came from. We act like we don't know where Lakurawa came from. However, when you see small bandits or thugs, as you call it, build an environment where kidnapping, ransom, and terror is profitable, then we're going to see continuous proliferation of terror across the country. We're going to see continuous entrenchment of terror across the country. We're now a terrorized people. And I think for us, our government needs to stop kicking the ball down the line. There have been accusations by governors or ex-governors that people are paying money to bandits to try and maintain peace in different areas of the country. What that does is that you just kick the ball down the line. So many administrations before this administration have done just that. Instead of eradicate the problem, they've tried to maintain a sort of status quo that has only made the wound fester.
Absolutely. I mean, this comes back to what I was trying to say, to the National Assembly members about the sort of right questions that we need to ask. It is good to talk to each other, but then let's talk sincerely and frankly, to each other. The media alone cannot do it, and they're even making the job of the media a lot more difficult. And you could see from what we just read out, 25 people kidnapped have regained their freedom. That's the word there, in quote, have regained their freedom. And the next question that not just the media should ask, but also, every person concerned, particularly members of the National Assembly, should be how did they regain, their freedom? Were they rescued? Was ransom paid? If then we now go with what has been said in some quarters, which of course the video that you referenced, also alluded to, is that our authorities, DSS, military, had a conversation with the kidnappers. What sort of conversations could they have had that will lead to you releasing, the kidnapped people without even attempting to arrest them, to bring them to book, or to basically, do what is required that you do to, to kidnap us? So, like you said, maybe this is a euphemism, for what we know has been going on for a long time. Otherwise, it will not have festered this, for this long. These are the questions that National Assembly, like the media, should continue to ask, and ask pointedly that when this happens, who do we hold responsible? Otherwise, we come back, as we are witnessing over and over again, that the same places that people have been kidnapped and released, they keep going back there. In Kwara State, in Niger State, in Borno, in Katsina, same places, they keep going back there. What, therefore, is the need for a national emergency that the president has declared if we won't be able to bring anybody to justice? We won't be able to bring anybody to book. There are small talks here and there about the fact that, how are you sure that they've not even exterminated those who carried out this dastardly act? How do we know? How are we able to report that kidnappings are taking place and that our authorities are discussing with kidnappers, but then when it comes to the fact that, we have dealt with them, no proof, no single proof? We need to do a lot more. And I think that we need to be a lot more sincere to Nigerians. Many people are not happy with the manner in which things have been handled at the moment.
Many people are afraid.
and also not happy.
Yes, but because
a terrorized nation is almost like a conquered nation. You've conquered people mentally, and that's not fair.
It's not right. While a surge in militant attacks and instability in northern Nigeria is driving hunger to record levels. And that's according to the UN World Food Programme, which has also warned that nearly 35 million people could go hungry in 2026 as it runs out of resources in December. The projection, based on the latest CADAR harmonies and analysis of acute food and nutrition insecurity in the Sahel and West Africa region, is the highest number recorded in Nigeria since monitoring began. Violence has escalated in 2025 with attacks by insurgents, including an Al-Qaeda affiliate which carried out its first strike in Nigeria last month, and the Islamic State West Africa province ISWAP. Recent incidents underscore the crisis. ISWAP fighters killed a brigadier general in the northeast, while armed bandits abducted more than 300 Catholic students in a mass kidnapping days after storming a public school, killing a deputy head teacher and seizing 25 schoolgirls. WFP warned it will run out of funds for emergency food and nutrition aid by December, leaving millions dependent on its support without assistance in 2026. Well, we've been discussing insecurity, and now we are discussing beyond the terror, beyond the kidnapping, is that the insecurity is also resulting in hunger. Now, this is, sometimes we have these conversations and we realize we've been having the same conversations for years. I don't even know how you do it because you have the same conversation. Because of bandits and terrorists, our farmers can't go to farm. Or because of this, there's no one to harvest. Or because of clashes between herders and farmers, we're losing food stock. At the same time, we have not improved our whole economy when it comes to the storage of food, when it comes to getting food to table. At the same time, we're having conversations that increased attacks means that people are at risk. We have children that we've spoken on this table this year multiple times about child malnutrition, particularly in the north, but also across the south. I think people don't understand that child malnutrition is significantly bad, including in southern Nigeria. We're talking about stunted growth for children. That means you are permanently handicapping these children. They will never match their peers across the world if they are not properly nourished in their childhood. Now we're talking about millions of Nigerians at risk of hunger, but we've been having the same conversation on this same table because we have also spoken about multidimensional poverty time and time again. The president called a state of emergency on food security.
On food security. That was the first that he did in 2023. But here we are today,
I'll let you.
I feel your pain, because it's painful to keep on discussing these things. You said that you wonder how we're able to do this, over and over again. Sometimes if you're a newspaper columnist or you are an analyst, even on TV, and you've done this for years, and you write opinion articles and etc., you get to a state that you begin to think that you are starting to plagiarize yourself. Yeah. Because you discussed the same issue 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and we're still back here different government, different faces, but the same things keep happening. And you are wondering what is, why this doom that we have to deal with ceaselessly, almost every year. And of course, it goes without saying that anywhere where there is war, or ceaseless terror. Yes. And terrorism that we have now is almost like we're in a state of war. It goes without saying that, of course, it will affect, food security. It will affect, the poverty level. It will affect, hunger crisis. And this is what we are witnessing. If farmers are not able to go to their farms, they are not able to harvest products, they're not able to, send food to different places that they are meant to, this is what we'll keep on dealing with. And it will affect inflation, which is why I think that in dealing with this thing, we should be careful and look at it closely so that we don't continue to make a profitable industry, an enterprise out of this, because the consequences are dire. And that's what we are witnessing. We wouldn't need to wait for external bodies to show us the fact that if you continue along this line, food aid will stop, hunger will increase, people will die, and the country will be in the mess. This is what we are witnessing.
Of course. And of course, when we were speaking about food aid previously, this is also why we asked for concluded investigations. The National Assembly said it was going to investigate USAID funding Boko Haram. That investigation started and went quiet. No, but it is important because they said they were asking for withdrawal when Donald Trump then said that he was withdrawing aid from Nigeria. That's probably what he's threatening South Africa now with. When they reduced funding into the UN and, they raised alarm saying there's reduced funding coming from America and from European allies, that will affect hunger in Nigeria. People were saying, no, USAID funds Boko Haram, they can go. The people who are on the front line of the hunger and the terror are the same people. The people who are on the front line of this suffering and this insecurity and this instability and the lack of opportunities for themselves and their children are the same people. And the people who are sitting down at home and theorizing, or even sitting down in Texas or London and spreading this information are different people. And they're watching the suffering from behind their screens, from far away. And I don't think a lot of people are moved by this. I don't think a lot of people understand that lives are at risk here.
I think people do understand. Those who are supposed to show care are just not showing sufficient care, which is the shame, really, that we are dealing with. We'll move on to the next story, Adesua.
Well, I think that might be all we have on the week that was. I think the next story would have been about the coup or non-coup in Guinea-Bissau.
Which will have been an interesting discourse, given what former President Goodluck Jonathan, delivered there. Yeah. And I think that it's something that will also be of concern to our president, given the fact that he was in that same country twice in 2023. First African visit as a president in July, to Guinea-Bissau, and then for their 50th anniversary in November. So, seeing what is happening there now. But hey, we do not have sufficient time. But I think that people should pay keen attention to what President Goodluck Jonathan said about the no-coup situation that turned out to be a coup.
Yes, and because of the reports also coming out of RT there, Guinea-Bissau and Mbalo, a very interesting situation going over there. It seems the Sahelian belt of coups has added another one.
Sadly.
Very sadly. But that's all we have for you on the week that was.